Here we are today at the Lamy Depot, and we're just north of the Lamy Depot, and this is where the Ortiz Hotel was. The Ortiz was built in 1909, opened in 1910, and was destroyed in 1943. It was a small hotel, as you're going to see from the model, but this is where it was. The Lamy Depot is right down there, so this is the ground that it used to be on. This is part of the platform that served both the hotel and the Lamy Depot. Now there's a private residence in this old Hamilton car, and the Santa Fe Southern Railroad also stores some of their equipment here.
Owen Wister, author of The Virginian and writer of much other fiction, when he had finished his stay at the Ortiz, could not resist the inclination to put into words his agreeable surprise in finding such a delightful stopping place where he had expected a hostelry with barn-like appearance and conveniences which experience had taught him abounded in the small junction towns of the country. Mr. Wister was a pleased man all over when he passed the threshold of the hotel going forward to register, but he was actually the embodiment of effervescent enthusiasm as he shook hands with manager Jacob Stein. After leaving, when settled in on the train between Chicago and Philadelphia, he penned a letter to Mr. Stein. When a man is expecting something good and he gets it, he is a satisfied man. When he is expecting something bad and gets it, he keeps cool, because he was ready. When a man has been expecting something bad and gets something very good instead, he is not merely satisfied, he is exultant, and blesses the world, blesses his neighbor, and everything that is in sight. Thus it was that I, being an overland traveler of 25 years, therefore well acquainted with small railroad junctions, stale beds, old towels, fried meat, copious coffee, and no bathroom, arrived at Lamy prepared to endure such things with philosophy. Instead, I found a little gem of architecture, a little clean haven of taste and comfort, where the temptation was to give up all plans and stay a week for the pleasure of living and resting in such a place. It was like the private house of someone who had lavished thought and care upon every nook. The Spanish fireplace in the living room was decorated with old, quaint pictures. Navajo rugs lay on the floor, furniture in keeping and comfortable. In the patio of this hacienda, pigeons were picking in the grass by the little center fountain. An attraction of early 20th century Lamy was El Ortiz, a Fred Harvey restaurant and hotel built to accommodate tired and hungry passengers. Built in 1909 and opened in 1910, the hacienda-styled El Ortiz sat just to the east of the present depot and was a gray stucco building that had heavy protruding vigas. Inside, the walls and ceilings were plastered in immaculate white. Santos, Spanish engravings, photographs, and old paintings on cowhides decorated the walls of the expansive living room. Indian rugs covered the floors. A huge fireplace had hammered copper work on the mantel. The dark, dignified, hand-carved furniture was formed of brass, leather, and Flemish oak. At one end of the room was the lunchroom. Behind polished counters, the famed Harvey girls, neat, well-starched in their black and white uniforms and unfailingly polite, awaited amid a battery of coffee and tea urns. El Ortiz had a dozen or so rooms, all without baths, opened onto a grassy patio whose perimeter in the growing season was verdant scene of hanging vines and split-log planter boxes. El Ortiz was closed in April of 1942, prompting one writer in Santa Fe to note that many would mourn the passing of the littlest hotel in the littlest town. The building was torn down a few years later. Lamy was at its peak in the 1930s. The census of that decade gave the community a population of 329. The school was a going concern with about 70 students in the grades 1 through 8. For a wonderful glimpse of Lamy life in the mid-20th century, check out Janelle Wooten McQuitty's book, More Than a Whistle Stop. Little has changed in Lamy, but the Pink Garter is now the legal tender, awaiting the end of the COVID-19 pandemic to reopen again. The Lamy Depot has a tap room where the freight room used to be. Amtrak presence comes and goes, and there are only 3 trains each way per week. Freight trains no longer run up the grade to Glorieta, instead taking the less difficult route through Berlin and the Southern Transcon. After modeling the Lamy Depot in HO scale, I thought that building a model of the Ortiz Hotel would be a challenge without being overwhelming. It was never a large property, but the difficulty would be getting enough information about the building to model it. There were old photographs, but I needed a floor plan at the very minimum. I wrote several sources that might have plans for the old hotel, but in my research I came across Fred Shaw, who had written a book on Mary Jane Colter, including a chapter on the L. Ortiz. The book, False Architect, the Mary Colter Hoax, is very well researched and contains some reproductions of the original architectural drawings. I wrote to Mr. Shaw, explained my project to him, and he very generously sent me photos of the old hotel and a PDF file of the original drawings by architect Louis Curtis. I really couldn't have done this project without his help. Once I had the drawings, the process of building the model was the same as the Lamy Depot. I used a CAD program to create the individual walls and rooms and printed them on my 3D printer. The fireplace was the most interesting to design, and I was able to print the entire room as one piece. The rest of the building was designed and built around the fireplace room. Instead of lighting each room as I did with the Lamy Depot, I decided to place 3 outdoor lights and just 3 indoor lights. I may add more later, which would be easy enough because I designed the roof to be removed in individual sections to view the interior rooms. There aren't any photos of the guest rooms that I could find, but the drawing showed individual sinks in each room and 3 community bathrooms with toilets and tubs. These were designed and printed as complete units. The plans contained detailed drawings of the kitchen equipment, and those were fun to design and print. There is even a proofing cabinet for bread, 2 kitchen sinks, a stove, broiler and oven, and a ventilation hood. Refrigeration in those days was provided by ice, which I assume was delivered on a daily basis. The ice-cooled refrigerator rooms were printed and placed in the storage room. On the south side was a root cellar, coal storage, and charcoal storage rooms. The building was heated by steam fired by coal. A challenge presented itself because the boiler room is half subterranean, which meant cutting a hole in the wood where the model would be to accommodate that room. I even designed and printed a boiler. In 1913, a dining room addition was added on where the terrace is. I chose to leave the model as Mr. Curtis originally designed it. The hotel was destroyed in 1943. It's hard to imagine that El Ortiz would have been successful with Santa Fe being a more interesting destination only 18 miles away. For more detail on my building process, I invite you to check out the videos on 3D printing and the Lamy Depot.